Welcome to Brewing It Over with Cup North, the show that gives you the chance to deep dive into the topics shared in the content programme at our events. From social to consumer to sustainability issues, there's something for everyone. I'm Hannah Davis.
And I'm Grace Talbot. And today we're joined by Rosie Lowery from Marzocco, who moderated a panel on gender in the coffee industry at last year's Manchester Coffee Festival. With a passion for hospitality, community, and building connections, Rosie fell in love with the coffee industry for the way in which it brings people together. After graduating from London College of Fashion in 2017, Rosie started her specialty coffee journey at Upshot in Sheffield, and has since worked in various roles at coffee roasteries such as Alchemy and Outpost before moving into the marketing team at La Marzocco, where she's living out her dream for bringing people together through coffee and events since February 2022.
Before we welcome Rosie to the podcast, don't forget, if you want to listen to the panel that she moderated from Manchester Coffee Festival, hang on until the end of the podcast to hear the full recording.
Welcome, Rosie.
Hello.
Hello, how are you today?
Yeah, I'm really well, thank you. Thank you so much for having me. This is very exciting.
Good. We're very, very excited to have you. Thank you for joining us. Now, not to put you under pressure, but I am going to start this off with some questions. Are you prepared for some questions?
I mean, I'm not prepared, but I'm ready. I'm ready to improvise. Absolutely.
Don't worry, they're really difficult. It's fine. Number one, coming in hot. What is your coffee order?
My coffee order is genuinely like, if I'm in a place that I can just walk in and be like, what's good today? Like, I'm that person. I'd much rather, like, also because I kind of want to have a conversation with someone, but yeah, I mean, that doesn't work everywhere. Like, that doesn't work if you're in the airport and going to Starbucks. But yeah, pretty much, yeah, anywhere that's kind of got a extensive or, you know, more than one coffee on. Just what would you recommend? Because
yeah, I'm totally the same. That's my favorite thing to do. Is basically I'm incapable of decision making, right? Which I think is a large part of my problem. But if you can go in somewhere, you're like, tell me what I want, please. I think that's amazing.
I've not thought about it like that, actually. Yeah. Yeah, maybe it is
on your
actually
decision making skills. Just mine.
No, that actually rings true for me too. So I think you've sussed me out.
Mm-hmm. Excellent. Okay, no worries. The second question is just as difficult, but say you've walked into this dream cafe and you've spoken to dream barista who is making you dreamy beverage. What music is playing in our dreamy cafe?
I love this. Like a specific, like one specific song or like a genre?
You're allowed to interpret this question. This is just a chance for our lovely listeners to get to know you and judge you probably for your music choice.
I have to say, like, anything 80s.
Yes.
Like, yeah, for sure. Like, and if I walk in and there's also, like, this is me as when I used to be a barista, and like my playlist would always just be almost purely 80s. Anything from like pop to post punk, or yeah, like anything like that. Do you know what as well? Like, I always feel like it gets the conversation going, especially with like a different crowd who are like, oh, I haven't heard this song since I was 21 or something, and then
but you get to go on the nostalgia trip with them. Magic, yeah.
Exactly.
I think music plays a massive role in like your experience in a coffee shop. It can really like heighten it or offer opportunities to connect, which leads me perfectly into my final question. Okay. What is your most memorable coffee shop experience? Or one of, if you can't pick the most?
Oh, I feel like this is such a big question. Like, because I feel like this is one of those things that I'm going to say one, and then I'm going to later on tonight, when I'll wake up in the middle of the night and go, no, it was something else. My most memorable. I don't know where to go with this. Okay, so I would say it's more of a general time, but also, this is open to my own interpretation, right? So I'm going to go with what I'm thinking, because so I would actually say that like when I start thinking of like coffee shop experiences and what's most memorable to me, I think it would have to be that time when you actually start appreciating cafe culture and coffee shop culture and start to see it as more than just going for a coffee. And I think that started for me at a place called 108 in Truro in Cornwall, which is actually where I just fully like started to realize, it's the kind of place you'd go in and you would suddenly know, all the regulars, and like that's not really one specific memorable experience, but I think that to me sums up what coffee shops should be. And it's not actually so much about, oh my god, I went and had this incredible coffee this one time and I can't forget it. It's actually how people make you feel. And yeah, I think like, oh, it's a bit heart-wrenching. Genuinely, I think like maybe without my experience at 108 and being a customer there, like, and maybe I wouldn't even have gotten into like the coffee industry, like, because I think it was that
That
community
definitely
there that
counts as
made me.
memorable then, doesn't it?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, I've never actually thought about that before, but yeah, I think that, and also that goes. It was accessible as well, and I remember the time of actually, looking at, like those. I don't know if there's so much a thing anymore, but those big like chalkboards behind the counter, and they'd have like the options for V60 and the options for batch and the options for espresso, and I remember the anxiety that used to give me, and I'm like, oh, what does that mean? Like, I'm going to say the wrong thing, and they're going to tell me to get out or something. But I think, actually, 108 in Truro, like it was always okay to, if it was someone going in and wanting a caramel latte, or it was someone going in and saying, oh, like we just said, Grace, like, what would you recommend? Like, what have you got? What you brewing on filter? That's shout out to 108.
Yeah, thank you. Those accessible coffee experiences are vital. And look, as you say, it was one of the dominoes that had to go over for you to end up in this job. And we're very glad because now we can chat to you today thanks to that experience. So yeah, it definitely counts as memorable.
Definitely. It's actually very thought-provoking as well. Thanks.
I think that we could probably do a whole podcast on the accessibility of specialty coffee shops and how people don't always feel welcome. I think it's a huge barrier for the specialty industry in particular. And yeah, I think it's something we could definitely chat more about. But today we're here to chat about your panel from last year. And the title of that panel was Gender in the Coffee Industry, which is a huge topic. And the panel was true to that huge topic, and that there was a kind of a real broad range of discussions throughout the panel, ranging from the experiences of producers at origin, right through to the experiences of non-binary and trans people, and kind of misgendering in coffee shops and McDonald's of all places. So yeah, it's well worth hanging on to the end to listen to the full discussion. But I think we're going to get stuck into some questions that kind of have arisen from that discussion, and kind of delve deeper into some of the topics. So I'm going to go in, we'll get right stuck in and go in with a big question. Yeah, and I think we'll start by talking about kind of traditional gender roles in coffee, and how a lot of the time we do see a lot of the kind of serving and front of house roles are assigned to women, and then a lot of the kind of more technical roles, specifically, you working for La Marzocco, there might be like a higher percentage of like men working in the technical positions. How do you think that we can challenge those traditional gender roles in the coffee industry?
So I think with gender roles, and kind of, I guess, in any industry and just in general, I think it actually starts quite early on, and I think it's actually going to be quite a long process of when this will change. And I don't think it's just the coffee industry, but I think it's most industries. And I think when we think about, okay, what's one thing we could do to help, it's actually in my opinion. I think it comes to how we're brought up, and I think it comes to gender roles are we start absorbing them from a very, very young age, right? And in terms of thinking about, like, a good example, I think, is, you know, like you were just saying about technical roles. And I think, so actually in the Marzocco team here in the UK, we at the moment have a 50-50 split. There are two technical people. One is Amin and one is Hannah. But if I think about something like the engineer network that we work with, registered engineers who work with us, there is I don't know that we actually work with any female engineers in the engineering network. So I think that comes down to, I don't think it's because anyone's saying you're a woman, you can't be an engineer. I actually think it comes down to what we're taught when we grow up, and that we don't consider that an option, or we don't get interested in those things, or the way that we're told to be doesn't it doesn't allow us to imagine that. And I think it just starts with, it's a difficult one, because I think even if you parent a child and you try the best you can to not involve any of that stuff, like, it's still the media, it's still TV, it's still film, it's still everything that we absorb, like hundreds and hundreds of signals every day, and continue to do throughout our life. Like, it's in our subconscious, and the things that men are taught to be and the things that women are taught to be, if we're just talking about those two genders, are unfortunately very different. And I think that is actually the root of why there is an imbalance. And like you were saying about women being more heavily in maybe hospitality roles, that kind of thing, we are taught more to be nurturing and to be more looking after people and that kind of thing, whether we're taught that consciously or subconsciously.
I think that what you're saying is that this isn't a coffee industry issue. It's like a much wider issue, and something that is extremely challenging. And like you say, even like I as a parent work really hard to not kind of apply like typical gender boundaries to my daughter, but like she goes off to nursery and she gets influenced by all of these things outside of my control, and she is naturally influenced by those things. That it does make it incredibly challenging to be able to instill that from a young age. But I think that's a really fair point, that we have like a much wider societal issue to kind of tackle. It's not just within the coffee industry.
I agree. I think there's in specialty, we get very good at pointing out the imbalance and then trying to look kind of very insular to explain it. And I am not excusing previous power dynamic balances that have contributed to this, but I do also agree that the external force of how we are socialized when we present as female versus men influences even the skill sets that we develop that then influence the jobs we go for. As a child, I grew up with two siblings, both of whom were brothers, and they were taught to be kind of gregarious and out there, and I was given a doll to play with and to care for, which probably had a knock on into why I then wanted to work in customer service and enjoyed making people feel nice, right? These things work together. But with that in mind, full in the face of that knowledge that there is a societal force that you are having to counterbalance as a business, do you think there is an onus on businesses to do kind of to build into their hiring practices a recognition of that? So maybe cater more to hiring more female presenting people or gender non-conforming folk to kind of counterbalance that, or even offer more training opportunities within tech or engineering to women and gender non-conforming folk?
Very big question. So I think a couple of things. So I recently read like a study that had been done on actually the the effectiveness, is effectiveness a word?
Yes. Yeah.
Effectiveness of like blind interviewing. Like, you know, you don't see the name, even just a name can be, you know, and that unconscious bias on not seeing what the person looks like, not seeing what gender they are, not seeing their name, actually has a huge impact on hiring and who gets hired, and which is just, I mean, I don't think that's even something that we would ever consider that we do, and I think it is a subconscious thing. But the like studies have shown that when that is compared to, you know, a normal interviewing process, like much more men are hired in the traditional interviewing spaces than with the blind ones. So yeah, that's kind of, again, a non-coffee industry related thing. It's just a general thing. The other question to that was, is it okay to kind of actively hire more, you know, non-men, women, non-binary people, underrepresented genders? I think it completely depends on why the company's doing it. I think if it's, you know, at the end of the day, it should be because they care about the people that are working for them. It shouldn't be about, oh, my company looks bad if, you know, I've only got men working for me, which, to be fair, it probably does. But yeah, I think if it's for a genuine reason that they, you know, even something as simple as, if I, speaking for Marzocco because that's where I work, even if, you know, when in R&D, if machines are only tested by men, the outcome is that those machines are developed for men, right?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And I think in many industries that is an issue. We, you know, even for the size of mobile phones, they're developed for men. And then mostly, especially for someone like me who has very small hands, like they're too big, like it doesn't work. So I think, yeah, if you're doing it for the right reasons, which again is a whole, like, what are the right reasons, then yeah, I think 100%, like, I'm for, you know, positive discrimination. That's the right term, isn't it? It sounds so severe, like saying discrimination, but yeah, positively, because your company is who works for you, right? And
Yeah.
it's, yeah, you need a diverse range of voices, you need a diverse range of representation, not just so that you look better as a company, but because you're probably, your audience is a diverse range of people. So how are you gonna effectively, you know, market your products or, you know, sell to people if you're not representing your audience in who you are?
Yeah. Yeah, you'll only have one voice kind of contributing to your echo chamber if you don't have a diverse populace of people working for you. So then you may be surprised when the feedback when you deliver a product only appeals it to one sort of type of individual.
100%.
Yeah, I think connected to that idea that of hiring, I suppose some people might feel like they aren't qualified for a position if they're looking at like a, you know, they go onto the website of the company and they just see images of the staff and they're all, you know, white men, for example. They might not feel like they're able to apply and be part of that team. And oftentimes we hear this quote, you know, we can't be what we cannot see. And I think that I do, to some extent, agree with that quote. And it's something that I think about a lot when we create our programs for our events, making sure that we have like a diverse range of faces in the program so that our audience and our attendees, when they look at our program, they feel welcome at the event, they feel like they're represented and they feel like they can be a part of it. But on the other hand, there are marginalised groups who've been years fighting against that status quo, and they might look at it and see, yeah, I'm not there, but I can be and I want to be, and they fight against that. What do you think about that quote? Do you think it sort of diminishes those marginalised voices?
I think that for me, I completely 100% believe that, that you can't, it's not that you can't imagine yourself in roles if you don't see people that look like you in roles, because of course you can. And I don't think it's as simple as saying that, you can, for example, my parents, 100%, I'm really lucky, they always said, like, you can be whatever you want. Like, they, when I was 9, I looked up to Avril Lavigne, so they got me a guitar. I got a bit older and I was like, I want to be a fashion designer, so they got me a sewing machine. But still, I mean, it's going back to what we taught in the beginning, and why did I want a sewing machine over a toolbox? I've never had any interest in, but is that because what I was brought up to believe that my gender meant was that I would be interested in fashion, and I would be interested in, all these things that kind of make up my identity. Yeah, so I think I completely get the whole, like, people have been campaigning and fighting against the status quo, as it were, like, for a long time, and they still could say, no, actually, I should be in that industry, I should be in that role. But I think for me, there's always going to be people that have it in them to rebel, and have it in them to say, actually, no, that's not right, and actually, I want to see a change, but that's not something that everyone has the capability to do, for many different reasons, or whether that's their upbringing, whether that's, class, whether that's race, whether that's it's not something that it's not something we have a choice in. I don't think it's like, oh, you could believe that you could be anything, but you're just not fighting against it. Like, it's amazing we have those people that are going, like, we need to have a change and we're going to fight for it, but we can't, like, not think about the fact that so many people don't even have a chance to think that. I think in the panel talk, I talk about my dad, but I'm going to talk about my mum now. So it was about, I think it was about 2-3 years ago. So my mum and dad for a little while had a fish and chip shop in Cornwall, and then they had that for about 10 years, and they moved back to Sheffield, sort of to semi-retire. And my mum started working in a chippy in Sheffield, and she was kind of just doing the general roles, like on the counter, serving, wrapping, that kind of stuff. And they started advertising for a management position in the chippy. And my mum said to me, she was telling me about that, and she said, "Oh, they explained what the job role was and everything, and that it would be, the level of responsibility was opening and closing the shop, key holder, would be doing more frying, kind of managing the staff on shift." And she said, I was thinking about applying for this, but I don't think that I can. And I said, what do you mean you don't think you can? Like, you literally had your own business for the past 10 years. And she said, well, because like they wouldn't let a woman do that. Like, and I don't, but I think for us here, like, we wouldn't normally come across people that would say something like that, because we probably are in the kind of groups of people who, understand and get that, actually, no, like, it's okay to say, I'm going to do whatever I want. But I'm sure there are many more people like my mum who's never actually been in a circle that's been remotely rebellious or said, actually questioned what being a woman means or what gender means, or she's probably never ever thought about that. And you know, that comment from her was very like, it was just offhand, like it didn't even really mean anything. And to me, I was like, what are you saying? Like, that's insane. And also, like, what, you know, if that's what you believe. And my mum turned 60 this year, so this was maybe, you know, in her late 50s. What could, not that I'm saying that she wants to live her life any other way, but it's thinking, well, what could my mum have done if she hadn't have had that mentality? Like, if she's got that mentality by 57, then what was she thinking when she was 20? You know? So actually, yeah, like I think we're probably sitting in a virtual room of people that all believe, like, yeah, it doesn't matter, like gender doesn't confine me to what I can do, and you know, we will push boundaries and we will fight for what we want and what we think's right and what we think's right for other people. But I think we also have to consider that's definitely not the case for everyone. And yeah, like yeah, that it's something that why do we have to challenge the status quo? Like, why can't we dream of a day when it's just the norm um for all engineers to be female, and or not men, sorry. Actually, I did check if my colleague would be okay with me saying this, but recently at London Coffee Festival, she was setting up for the show and fixing one of the machines when it went on the stand, and someone came over to her, and I think it's quite good that this person was very curious and actually wanted to have a conversation. But he said, I don't mean this to sound disrespectful, but in my however long it was that he's been in coffee, 20 years or something, I've never seen a female engineer. And she did have a conversation with him about that and everything, and he took a photo of her. And
Wow.
I did ask her that it was okay
Consent.
to share that,
Spotted
actually.
in the wild.
Yeah,
I
exactly.
know.
Yeah, I know, exactly.
David Attenborough
He did
level.
actually he did post it on Instagram, actually, on a story, and it was a very sweet photo. But yeah, and she was okay with that. And I think there was something to be said about, I mean, he was being curious. I don't think he was being like, oh my god, like I need to take a picture of this because it's so. But yeah, why can't it be the norm? Like,
Yeah.
I just hope for a day that doesn't happen, and it's not like, whoa, what are you doing with a
Yeah.
screwdriver? You know.
That anecdote alone, while sort of heartwarming on one level, it just quantifies the topic here, doesn't it? Like the fact that for him was so noteworthy that he needed photographic evidence speaks to the topic. The reason why we are having a podcast based on a panel discussion that is an ongoing kind of theme we need to explore and challenge and overturn. It's a really interesting contribution, I think, the story about your mum. You're right, we particularly nowadays with social media, we do tend to exist in echo chambers where we're largely reflected back opinions and beliefs we already hold. And you know, I am lucky enough to be surrounded by a lot of supportive and rebellious folk that make it seem that much more attainable to be rebellious. And there's strength in that as well, because I think the flip side of this is that you can be fatigued, right? Like, I am happy to stand up and demand rebellion and be active in that, but also after a while you are allowed to be tired and say, I do not want to have to be the voice of all women in coffee, queer people in coffee. I want people in power who are part of that not balance to step up and affect change too. So I think in terms of representation, something important about kind of capturing images of women and gender non-conforming people in a variety of roles is it can be part of that implicit messaging. While we're not asking those individuals to speak to an experience, having that as representation and that kind of diluting the mass onslaught of seeing white men in those roles. For our younger generation, it's just changing that balance, isn't it? It's diluting the number of men you're seeing in roles and just changing the options. And that, I think, can go quite a long way when you're talking about those systemic changes that need to happen. So if you're like 9 and you Google, I don't know, coffee technician, imagine if Google Images just spits back a variety of options for you. That's nobody having to speak, but it says a lot and it can influence change. This is not the natural segue I was going for here, but I was trying to make that lead into, do you think because particularly in specialty coffee, we do tend to start in these customer facing roles, and you have to be perceived in real time, and there is a rapport that you end up building up there? Is there anything that we or business owners can do to help with the language that's often used with customers? I certainly, like, particularly when I had a shaved head, I had a lot of misgendering, and it didn't affect me too much, but I know that's because I am cisgendered and I didn't have any kind of conflict with that, but I still noticed it. I still got I got called little boy quite a lot. Which, you know, it's all good. It's all good. But that can have a real effect
In a way,
on
I kind
people.
of love that for you, Grace.
Do you know what? I did too. It became a bit of a joke with the rest of the team. But is there any messaging you think that coffee businesses can offer their patrons to help with language and over familiarity or crossing those boundaries? Another big question. Sorry.
I know, it's such a tricky one, isn't it? And you mean specifically for like the people behind the counter talking to the customer
Yeah,
base?
so that it doesn't have to be
Yeah.
on them in real time when they're in a kind of service position to challenge like a customer. You know, actually, my pronouns are they, them, or similar.
Yeah. It's such a tricky one, isn't it? Because, I mean, how can your customers are, that's kind of the scary thing about hospitality as well. It's like your customers could be anyone. And I guess as a business owner, you've got this responsibility for your team that are working there, that you need to create a safe space for them, and they need to be able to feel safe and welcomed coming into work. I guess, oh, it's tricky. I wish I had the answer, but like, yeah, I know, yeah, if it like more of a discussion kind of base. I mean, I think that especially coffee in a way as well, kind of going back to what we were talking about right at the start, and that accessibility, and it is actually a place for communication and actually having a conversation. And I guess I wonder if we're in a, I know, like I was going to say, like a kind of a more privileged situation than other forms of hospitality, because it is kind of, there are a lot of business owners that I speak to when I do kind of photograph cafes, or do panel talks with people who own businesses, and it seems like it is a very huge thing for people to want to create like this safe space and this welcoming space, and whether that's for the customers to feel welcome, and how do I make it easier for the customer to feel welcome here, and not have that anxiety that I used to have of going, oh, I don't know what I'm doing with this board. And also, like, there seems to be, I mean, I don't want to speak generally as well. I think it's a bit, it's not very nice to speak generally, but maybe it's more the people that I'm speaking to, like that they want to create a space for their team as well, that they act, it's probably independent business as well that are doing that. And it's such a tricky one. That kind of takes us back to what's spoken about in the podcast, and with the whole thing at McDonald's and the name badge scenario, and whether that's a help or a hindrance, or whether it's making people feel more other to put their pronouns on their badge. And I, it's it's such a tricky one. Like, yeah. I think also, if anyone's listening to this and has ideas, and you ever see me around, please let's have a chat about it, because I would love to. I'd love to have like as many discussions about this as possible, and how do we encourage customers to. It's the general public, isn't it? Like, how do you encourage the general public to be better and be more inclusive and welcoming, and just make everyone's life a bit easier?
Yeah, I think we can flip it a bit and put a little bit more of the responsibility on the people behind the bar as opposed to the customers. Recently, I was in a restaurant, and just like a very casual restaurant, and when they brought my food, they called me madam. And I just thought, this is so traditional and outdated. And like, I am, she, her, I don't mind if people refer to me in that way, but you don't need to call me madam when you put my food down. So I think if you're, and I wouldn't expect to see that in a specialty coffee shop, but you might see it in some of the chain coffee shops if the people working there, excuse me, are a bit more traditional. So I think, kind of setting the example from behind the bar that you don't refer to your customers as sir or madam is like a really good step in like just showing that you don't need to use gendered language when you're communicating in that situation.
Yeah, there's a give and
Definitely.
take element, isn't there? I think if you set the standard behind the bar and can demonstrate through the language choices you make to your customers, particularly with regulars, hopefully there's the opportunity for them to take that on board. I do think it's a tricky thing insofar as I wouldn't ever want to suggest that like the onus was on the individual barista every single time to have to correct a member of the public if they were continuously misgendering them. So I think there does have to be like a communication piece with the customers in attendance, so that there's even, in the same way that, I mean, it's kind of disappointing when you see it, but when you go into banks and it's like, we will not tolerate aggressive language to our bank tellers. Obviously, we don't want to have this preset that we are assuming the general public will come in with aggression, but some kind of messaging that supports gender neutral language. Like, please be aware that in this coffee shop, we advocate for gender neutral language where possible. Something like that as a communication piece, again, and it opens the door, doesn't it, to a dialogue where if you're the customer in attendance and you're like, oh, I don't know what gender neutral language is, there's an opportunity to learn. And I think a lot of people have become afraid to even open that door to dialogue, particularly those people not in the same types of echo chambers as us, because they're afraid of getting it wrong, offending people, getting cancelled. All of the fears of 2023 come as part of it. So it's a two-sided kind of position, isn't it? Both the team and the businesses and the public have to be willing to engage with it.
Definitely. Yeah, I think it's such a like it is like, it feels like a very generational thing as well, and I think, we can't take for granted that people like my mum would, like you say, Grace, like know what that sign would mean. But it does. I don't think that means that we should. I actually think that's a great idea. But it doesn't mean that we shouldn't provoke those sorts of conversations, because I think at the end of the day, what it boils down to is that we do need to be having conversations. And exactly like you say, like, there are people who will not have ever, ever come across that there are genders outside of male and female, and it's not really their fault. But it kind of is their responsibility to be welcoming, and just be a decent person, and kind of have some empathy for the fact that, it, just to have the conversation. And then it's also on the other side of us being like, amazing, thank you for asking. And like, being curious in a sensitive and empathetic way, I think is paramount.
Well, it ties in nicely with what you were talking about as your memorable experience, doesn't it? Because these things relate, don't they? So in 108, if you've already created an environment where people feel safe to have a conversation with you as a barista, then you have much more safety in then going into something a bit more personal or charged. Whereas if the preset, like Hannah was saying, is that you go in and you're intimidated and there's all this messaging about specialty coffee that you don't know where to begin with, of course you're not going to go any deeper into the topic of gender and diversity because you're already like, I don't even know how to order a beverage, let alone talk to you about gender norms.
100%. It's definitely like full circle, isn't it? Like if we're creating this safe space where I think all baristas can relate to, like, the fact that if you work in a place long enough, you kind of you know, it's the most amazing part about working as a barista for me was always the connections you'd make with customers, the fact you become such a integral part of their day, and like after a certain amount of time you almost become like a therapist in a way. Like, you know, it's amazing how people will open up to you. So and I think that speaks volumes, that if you have created this, you know, space that people feel comfortable to do that, then those kind of conversations will become much easier.
Well, thank you so much. I think this is such a vast and complicated topic that we could genuinely continue to discuss it for the rest of time, but we have a limited amount of time on this podcast. So thank you so much, Rosie, for joining us on Brewing It Over. If people want to learn more about you, about La Marzocco, where should they head to?
They could go to Instagram and it's at Marzocco UK. There's several La Marzoccos around the world, so if you want to see what we're doing, keep up to date with our events, that kind of thing, head to La Marzocco UK. And if you want to, for some reason, keep up with me personally, I'm Sour Pickle on Instagram.
We will link all of that in the show notes so people can easily find you. Sour Pickle with an O.
Thank you so much. And sorry, also, it was very rude of me. I didn't say thank you so much for having me on. Like, this is an absolute, such a dream, and really good to chat with you about this subject. And also, I really would welcome anyone to come and, like, I always want to continue this discussion and hear all sides of the debate. And like if you ever, I know I blend in quite well at coffee events. It's quite hard to spot me, but do come and have a chat, because I'm always open to the conversation. 100%. And thank you so much. Thanks for having me.
Oh, thank you. And yeah, for our listeners, keep listening now for the recording of Rosie's panel from Manchester Coffee Festival. Just a little note that the panel was recorded during a busy event and the sound quality drops at a couple of points, but we think it's well worth a listen. There's loads in there.
It is.
And thanks for listening. We'll be back soon for another episode of Brewing It Over.
Thank you.
Hello. Oh, I wasn't expecting that. That's nice. Okay. I'm Rosie. I work for La Marzocco in marketing. Pronouns are she, her. Really excited to do this panel on gender today. Don't mind if we start by introducing ourselves, if you want to do pronouns and what your job is in coffee.
Oh.
Start here.
I'll go first. Hi, everyone. My name is Mel. My pronouns are they, them. I have been in coffee for at least 5 years. I lose count. And I'm currently a barista trainer. I am an AST with the SCA, though I do a little bit of volunteering and competing as well.
Hi everyone, I'm Kels. I run South Coast Roast. We are a roastery based in Winchester. I've worked in coffee for about 10 years now, done everything from barista, trainer, and now operations manager of a roastery. Pronouns are her, she. And over to you.
Hi, I am Gabriella. I have been working in coffee for the past 8 years in a green coffee importing company. So I bring coffee to the UK, and my pronoun is she.
Thank you so much for introducing yourself so well. If we start off, introductory question of, to you personally, what does gender equity and equality mean to you in regards to the coffee industry? Whoever wants to go first, take the stage.
I think it's quite simple. everyone be treated the same. I've been racking my brain about what I personally think about it, and I think it is quite simple. Everyone's treated the same. Everyone is human, no matter how you identify, what race you are, what ethnicity you are. And I don't think we talk about it enough. So even in coffee, I think it's a great almost excuse. We don't need an excuse to talk about it, but I feel like it's a great excuse to bring it to everyone's attention.
I mean, you covered it pretty well there, but does anyone have anything to add?
Well, yeah, I think it is also about when we say treating everyone the same, it does mean giving everyone the same opportunities, right? So everything should be achievable by anyone who wants it. At the same time, we have our differences. And so when we talk about gender and gender equality, maybe we need to talk about balance. It would have been really nice to have males here. more and we were supposed to, but
we were supposed to, yeah.
because it is about finding that balance and finding that way of how you give everyone the same opportunity whilst accepting that we're all different. And I'm sure this needs to be built with everyone.
Yeah.
Men, women, and everything in between that.
Yeah, for sure. And I think an important point is that we hear the word equity a lot. And equity is different from equality because, as you said, equality is treating everybody the same.
Yeah.
But equity is adjusting that to overcome individual barriers so that everybody then has equal opportunities. And that's where equity comes in when you talk about like an equitable coffee chain. So yeah, I think you kind of mentioned that really well. And for me personally, it's about gender is just another characteristic like race, like ethnicity, that there can be a disparity between what you see in, for example, competition or like, coffee celebrities and things like that, and the people who are working behind the bar and who are seen by the public every day, and how that feeds into a perception of what kind of person is a barista or is good at coffee. So that for me, it's kind of, being seen and being able to still achieve what everyone else can achieve, right?
Definitely. So with that in mind, talking about representation, in your opinion, where do we think that women and non-binary people are underrepresented in the industry, and why is that? Very big question.
That is a big
Very
question.
big question.
This might be the only question. I don't know. Well, I think the big obvious thing is the origin, producing countries. And that is a huge topic on itself because it's very visible, it's very there. But I also think that on this part of the world, and here we also have these more subtle situations, and I don't know, it's also maybe linked to the fact that a lot of jobs in a roastery are very physical, or that in certain milieus, when you climb up and when you're a little bit more ambitious, you see more men. So we can see that there is the origin part of it that's obvious and there, and there's a lot to talk about, and the consuming countries and this industry that we're all trying to make better, where things are here and there a little bit more subtle. And I don't know, but I see this on the green side of things, on the green coffee side of things, in certain milieus, and after a certain time, you start seeing men more than all the other genders.
Okay.
I think even in the farms get passed down generations, and generally I've seen that's only going down the male route. Like, why isn't it being passed down to the mum, to the daughter? Like, I think that's a big question in itself. even when you look at being a roaster in the past and sourcing green, even looking at pictures you get sent. I don't know about you guys, but it's just men. And champion women roasters, champion women farmers is a massive thing that I think we'll still need to get to.
Do you think that is, I mean, there is with representation in any industry, if someone cannot see themselves in that role, is it that they're not seeing women in those roles, so they're not aspiring to that? Or do you think it's more of that those opportunities aren't presented?
I'd like to answer it if that's okay, because yeah,
of course.
So I primarily work in training people to be ready for hospitality, often a lot of people who have never done hospitality before. And actually, to go back to that last question, what's very interesting is because hospitality is about preparing food and drink and caring for people's needs, it's actually for women and kind of female presenting people. It's something that might be seen as unpaid labor. For example, if you're at home, you might be in charge of cooking and looking after the home. Therefore, it's perceived a little differently when someone who isn't a woman does it. And I think that actually contributes to coffee, because coffee is part of hospitality,
right,
no matter where we look at it, right? And to go on to whether that might have an impact on whether people want to go into it, I think it definitely does. So something that I often see when I'm training in my day-to-day, I train in London. London is an extremely diverse city, and there have been times when we've wanted to, share some educational material where all of the people represented in that material are men, when I might only have 3 men in a group of 12 of people that I'm training. Or equally, it turns out that we only have infographics of baristas where they're portrayed as being white, when in London, actually, the majority of people in my groups are often people who are not white. And I think that can have an impact, even though baristas and cafes, and usually, you will be in a very good, caring team, you'll be with a good employer, that perception of what you're getting into, I think, can impact your experience. It has done for me personally in the past, especially in customer facing, because that's a little bit different to your colleagues. But that's just my experience from it.
Anyone else have any ideas on, I mean, I don't know if it's a similar thing at origin, that would be
Producing countries.
Yeah.
I think that sometimes the women themselves sometimes will not allow themselves to want certain jobs.
Yeah.
Or don't think about it because because the gender reality is like strongly made in their minds, and they don't ask themselves that kinds of questions.
Yeah.
And when they do, sometimes we work with like a farm that has a daughter that is trying to take over the farm. So that's all very nice. It's like a woman empowered coffee grower. But in the reality, and that's in Colombia, and in there, when you are a woman alone heading a big farm, you are more at risk if you are alone. So in a way, her dad is not completely letting it go. So it's things that can also see the reality of things and like ask yourself, how can we help in that situation?
I think that is actually coming back to equity again, maybe. Is there a way to get gender equity at origin, at farms? Or, I mean, does that, in your experience, is that a very far way away?
There is a way. I think we're not far from it. And I also think that today we have, if we look at the coffee growing regions, we kind of have a problem. A large majority of coffee growers are above 55 years old.
Right.
So we have, like, in specialty, a bit less, but as a general fact, coffee growing is not appealing to younger generations. So we have to see now a generational transition in coffee that will make coffee appealing, because it's gonna generate more revenue. It will pay better the coffee growers, and this will be done through quality. Eventually, coffee will become, I think, more and more a niche product and a high-end product. But this generational transition needs to be done, and I think will be done with women. I think it is happening right now, and I think we just need to look at what are the challenges that they face to be able to help them to overcome those challenges. But I think that this younger generation issue and gender equality issue come really close, and it is happening, and we need to have a look at what it means today to be a female coffee grower, or why we don't see more female coffee growers, and to see what the challenges are, and how we kind of help hand to hand women to be able to empower themselves in the coffee chain.
Definitely. And before we move on from gender equity at origin, because I mean, it's such a big topic anyway, right? But while we're on that subject, in terms of obviously what we see as a consumer and the kind of rise of female produced coffee labels, that kind of branding, and that as a that we're consuming. Is that important? Is that enough? What is your opinion, everyone, on that?
Well, it's really interesting because I think when we talk about origin, there's so many different countries and they all have their own culture, right? And the way that women, take ownership or are given a part in coffee processing or growing is going to depend on that culture. Because after all, we talk about origin, but we mean East Africa, which every country is different. West Africa, South Africa, we've got Central America, South America, people who speak Portuguese, people who speak Spanish. So it depends there, right? It's interesting because it depends a lot on the context and why we see it as a good thing to be buying from solely women coffee growers compared to, before we may not have known who grew it at all. And so the assumption there is the majority of coffee that I'm buying is actually being grown by men. So if I buy this coffee grown by women, it's making a positive difference. And I think it's interesting I think that's a good question to challenge. Actually, what is the reality? Is it making a positive impact on the growers? Is the impact we think we're making by buying it as consumers, is that going all the way back to the original? I wonder if you've had any experience from that, both working in a roastery and at origin.
I mean, it's interesting you touch on that. Sitting here now, I'm thinking, is it something consumers want to know about? Is it something we should be putting on packaging or putting on our websites as roasters, as wholesale?
Have female grown coffees in your range today?
Yeah. And I sort of shout about that quite a lot. I know Girls Who Grind, they do a big thing about it. Yeah. And I do think it's great. And I just wonder if it sort of hits home with consumers, and obviously just us drinking it at home, whether you actually take the time to think, oh, is this grown by a man or woman? Like, it's quite an interesting concept that I think everyone will have a personal view on. So, yeah.
I think all these labels and like ads about women coffee are quite new. So it is, I think it is useful because at least we are talking about it.
Yeah.
But it's the beginning and we cannot just stay there. I think we need to challenge a little bit these labels, asking about, so this is a coffee grown by women. There are still a lot of challenges for that woman. How can we help?
Yeah.
Or what does this label mean? I think we need to start to question a little bit more why. And maybe because why is a coffee grown by woman better than a coffee grown by men? Is that completely fair? Or can we take a coffee that is grown by a man, but like the company structure does a lot of things to empower women? They are not only the hand sorting the coffee, but there's a real policy in that farm or in that exporter to empower women. Do they also deserve a label? So I think that in a way include men as well as part of the solution. But that's a lot of questions that are new. We don't have all those labels yet.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
I think we will get there.
We're definitely, it feels like we're at the start of something for
It's
sure.
a turning point.
Yeah, exactly.
We've hit the turning point and we're on our way to change.
Yeah.
And I don't know if you also agree with this, but we're not in the 60s anymore. So this full of rage feminism, we kind of saw it doesn't work. So it needs to be something maybe a little bit less separating between men and women, or this or that. We're all and when you do this, because there is less separation, I think that you also include a lot better all the genders in between.
Sometimes you need to be angry before you can make a plan, right?
Yeah.
That's what we had. In the
Yeah.
60s, we were angry, and now we
So
can talk about it.
They did that for us. Thank you very much.
And now we can plan. But you're right. Like this is like, yeah, the kind of talking about it more the same way that when we start to talk about characteristics like ethnicity and, you know, talk about equality, then you can make positive change. So like if we talk about women growers, then it means that actually women are being recognized, that they can be growers, they can be business people in their own right. They can own a farm, which a few years ago might not in their community have been an accepted thing. I know there's the Partnership for Gender Equity in Coffee, PCG. I always mix up those letters. They are an organization who provide education in some communities at origin, which is not just business education, but they'll also do a little bit of work with the community so that men and women can both understand the impact of the business residing solely with one person in the family, and actually how sharing that can positively spread the load and it's only that by talking about it do we chip it down, right? Like you said, it's not worth just saying this is bad and this is good. It's a work in progress. So
I want to bring the conversation back to being in the cafe and hospitality itself. I feel like that's what a lot of people here will be able to resonate with and probably have some experience in and their own journey with that. A question for whoever feels obliged. What barriers do we think marginalized genders have in customer facing roles in hospitality, in the coffee industry right now? Recently.
I think when it comes to customer facing, when you're a barista or on till or a server, the reality of your life is you're probably dealing with hundreds of strangers who you may or may not ever see again in your life. And as is very natural, when you meet another human being, you can't help but make judgments about them.
Yeah.
And that's completely fine. We all do it. What it can mean if you are, for example, transitioning, or if your gender is not the same as the one that you present as in terms of your voice, your appearance, your facial hair, your height, it can mean other people, so potentially customers, sort of referring to you in terms that you are not comfortable with. Once or twice a day, usually fine. Usually if you're transgender, non-binary like myself, then you're used to that because not everybody knows what that is.
Right.
Few hundred times in a day can actually really wear down your mental health. That is a challenge that is unfortunately something that can happen, and that can only happen with a slow changing of mindset. As I said, it's a very slow process of learning new terms, talking about them. And that can be quite a challenge, particularly if you begin your career in hospitality before you potentially transition or change your identity, because your colleagues and everyone you're facing may have to adapt to new terms. And that's just an unfortunate reality of where we are at the moment. And I'm sure this has been happening for a long time as well. We're just talking about it now, really.
Do you have any ideas of what could help in that situation?
I feel like it's something that is going to be a gradual process. So, for example, with myself and my colleagues, we all often kind of openly, talk about individuals' gender and pronouns. And we have new trainees. We always ask everyone just to clarify what their pronouns are so we can get it right. Sometimes people actually change their minds halfway through the program, depending on how comfortable we feel. Some things that my colleagues do to help me out is if somebody refers to me with she, because that's how I look, no mistake of theirs, they'll usually correct that person for me.
Right.
They'll say, Mel's pronouns are they, actually, and then just continue with that. And also in our academy, we also kind of practice more gender neutral language if we don't know someone's pronouns as well.
Okay.
Because at the end of the day, everyone has used they, them pronouns before. Like if someone loses their phone, you say, well, someone has lost their phone. We're already using it.
They've lost their phone.
Yeah, exactly. But
Yeah.
it's just purposefully using and intentionally using it is quite a new concept for a lot of people. So I genuinely think it is time it will happen naturally, and just kind of being open to, you know, if you make a mistake, it's okay. Just coming past from it. I like to think that we are no longer in that angry phase where no one is getting incredibly upset if you slip up.
Yeah. And if you don't mind me asking, when your colleague has corrected someone, how does that make you feel?
It actually makes me feel really good. If there are days when, for example, when I'm training and I get very into it, I might get quite emotionally tired. I personally might not be in a place to correct somebody, even though I'd like to, and I'm sure they'd be understanding. But it's the same way that, for example, you might not want to have a conversation with an angry customer or a chatty customer on a particular day.
Yeah.
So it does make me feel really supported when my colleagues step in to do something like that, because I don't always have the strength to do it myself.
I actually have I think this is maybe an interesting thing to
spicy
add.
question. Go for it.
No, I was actually just going to say something actually about my own experience. Well, not my experience, my dad's experience.
Sure.
So my dad works in McDonald's, and they last year asked him if. Well, they put out an email to all the colleagues saying, because obviously in McDonald's you wear a name badge, and they asked if people would want, if you would like your pronouns on your name badge, that you can. My dad's 66, and he was like, what's this? He just came to me and was like, what's this about? Like, I don't, he just came with an open question, like, basically asked, what's a pronoun? Like, why would I put that on my name badge? And interestingly enough, there had been a situation that he told me about and kind of confided it in me recently in the past few months, of that there had recently been a trans woman that had started at his store, and that she was facing some misgendering from other colleagues. And I said, well, that is exactly your answer, right?
Yeah.
And that may, even you putting your pronoun on your badge, Dad, may help someone else who would, if she had just put that on her name badge and no one else had that on theirs.
Yeah.
That is her feeling maybe like an outsider, right? So if he was to then do it, that kind of makes it to her, okay, I can do that, and it feels like a more normalized, general thing that, some of us are doing, rather than I'm doing that because I have to stop you misgendering me, right? And I know we're not going to wear name badges in specialty coffee shops at all.
Yeah,
that would
generally no.
Generally not. I haven't seen that yet. But I just thought it was an interesting thing to add that McDonald's have brought that up.
I'd like to add something
Please,
to that as well, very quickly.
absolutely.
It's what's interesting about that, and thank you for sharing. I think it's really great that your dad asked you that. A lot of people feel scared to ask what pronouns are. And I think it's worth noting that in English-speaking countries, we don't get taught grammar. So actually, if you grew up in a country where you weren't speaking English since birth, you probably know what a pronoun is in the grammatical structure of your language,
right?
But we don't have that. So actually the word pronoun itself is a very unusual word to hear if you've been speaking English all your life. And then suddenly it's like a grammar thing, it's a gender thing. I've got no idea what this means. And so actually for a lot of people, they might be scared to ask because it's a complete unknown. Yeah. And as time goes on, sometimes people get more scared to not know something. Yeah. So it really is about breaking down, actually, just the same way that we talk about gender roles in, production and stuff like that. We have to start talking about it. We have to make a few mistakes and then we'll get okay with it, right?
I think that as someone that I'm not often in front of this kind of situations, I am often scared scared to like hurt anyone's feeling about it.
Exactly, yeah.
So you don't know. And all this pronoun things are quite new. So if I am writing an email about you, would I put they are or they is?
Yeah, exactly.
I don't know how to use it. So I
That's
think
a
we
good
all
point.
need to maybe be more, it's probably because it's the beginning. But don't be angry at me, because it's not because, because I'm not understanding. It's because I really don't know how to use it.
And maybe we just need more conversations like this
Yes.
of us understanding how to use pronouns and making it more of a easy subject to talk
I
about.
think people are shy away from it because they don't want to hurt anyone's feelings.
Right,
And
exactly.
they don't want to offend anyone. And I think it's almost worth saying that it's somewhat brave for a non-binary person, a queer person, to enter the world of hospitality, because me being a gay woman, you will always find controversy or some kind of discrimination. That one person that comes in that day can absolutely ruin your day by calling you anything.
Yeah.
Right.
And, it comes with having, as you said, if you've had a long day, mentally you're just not there, or, however it comes across from that person. But you've put yourself in that position, that job. And I think it's worth saying that's quite a brave thing to do, knowing that you might find that conflict.
Yeah, I would add as well, and actually I really like both of those points that you brought up. So one thing as well is that it is really hard to exist in the world as an LGBT person, because the world as it is right now is not currently built for us, but we're doing our best. But also, if you don't know this and you don't want to hurt other people, nobody wants to hurt other people, right? So it's like two parties being very brave at the same time. One thing I have found really has helped me as well, because often I might introduce myself to somebody and say, oh, hi, I'm Mel, my pronouns they, them, and the other person will say, oh, I'm Bob, and then I don't know what their pronouns are. What I do is I ask. Actually, you can ask someone and say, I'm so sorry, I didn't catch what your pronouns are. There's also lots of LGBT charities that have like guides on their website now where you can just Google, how do I use they pronouns? And it'll give you like a table. But also, I'm glad that you brought that up, because now I can answer your question. It would be they are for me, but some people might feel differently. And at the end of the day, I will still be able to understand your emails, so I won't be hurt by that. So yeah, for sure. Yeah. No, it's sometimes you can do a little bit of research. You can kind of like look online. There's lots of resources, but you can also ask the person directly, because that for me is the kindest thing you can do, because it shows that you care about me. And so actually I'm feeling more connected by, to everyone here just for having this conversation.
So I think a good question to finish with is to ask, like, what can we do collectively, either as customers or as just people working in the coffee industry, to make people in cafes how do we make it easier and better for them if they're feeling like we were just talking about, not grinding people down? And what are the steps we can take, simple things we can do?
I think it's just remembering that we baristas, people who work in coffee, are our own community. We're sort of our own family. And when you walk into a coffee shop, whether you're on your way to work, you've just got off a really busy train, or you're at the end of the day, just remember, like, you've entered this world that's like chill, all inclusive, and you sort of just you can turn your day off or turn your stresses off by walking into a coffee shop and just treating everyone the same. When I go into a coffee shop, I talk to the baristas like they're my mates.
Yeah.
And just be a bit more chill, relaxed, calm. And
for me, like, the reasons that I worked in coffee shops is because I loved how it brought people together and how you did connect with people that you maybe wouldn't normally ever come across. You would there's people I met and become friends with from being a barista that we would have never crossed paths otherwise, right? And that's a thing in itself, and that's kind of what coffee is like a catalyst for, if people are open to these conversations. And generally, I think people a lot of the time, they are going to a coffee shop because, you know, it's not always just for the coffee. It's for an experience. It's to be a part of something, whether that's the customer base or whether that's connecting with the people behind the bar, or, you know, feeling a part of a community, which actually goes hand in hand with us just wanting to be accepted. And right. Anything to add on?
It's all about keeping an open mind, really,
Right.
and just talking, you know? Like,
Exactly.
sometimes you learn something, or you realize you got someone's name wrong the entire time that you've known them. Like, we all make mistakes, right? So for me, it would be keeping an open mind. If you do slip up, know that it's okay, because you're going to try better next time. It's okay. I think everybody could use to be a little bit more forgiving of themselves.
Yeah.
And to ask more questions.
Ask more questions.
I mean, I know I'm saying that because I'm a trainer, and I would always rather that people asked, so that then I can answer and then they know. But yeah, that would be ask more questions, keep an open mind.
And probably also because it's new and we're all learning about it.
Yeah.
And things sometimes are, you see things, but we don't really know what things are. Maybe we need to go through that phase where we work with an external organization, an ONG or something that will explain how to come across. And I think companies could today work with some external institutions that work around gender and say, well, how do we do it? And maybe we can get that help across the whole industry, and maybe you need to print something and put it in your coffee shop, because it's the beginning and we all need to learn and to raise these subjects,
finding new ways, I think, and exploring and talking about things, asking questions. On the subject of asking questions, does anyone have any questions or any experiences they want to share? Because that's why we're here. Thank you so much. We might have a microphone for you if that's not too scary.
Fancy.
I love to see a lot of men in the audience as well.
Yes,
Not only-
right? Yeah. Thank you for everyone being here, but thanks to the men as well for being here, because that's, yeah.
He's an outline.
Sorry, please go on.
Yeah, I mean, you spoke about it a little bit earlier in terms of hospitality, but the main thing that I think a lot of us see is men more in the scientific and more technical areas of coffee, and women who historically have been seen in the caregiving roles more in the front of house roles.
Yeah.
And I was just wondering, in your guys' experience of the coffee chain, have you seen kind of a change in that and a development of those roles and previously gendered roles becoming a little bit more diverse in terms of the process?
Did you hear that, by the way? Okay, cool. Good.
Got it.
I think
Great question, by the way.
Thank you.
that was from a managing a roastery side of things. I can only go by things like engineers. I ring up the roaster engineer. I ring up Conti. You know, you've got, to my knowledge, 1-2 people that work at Conti. Marzocco, maybe a couple more. Women, that is. But with regards to engineers, they're all men. Why is that? Is that because engineering is a male field? I don't like that. I don't like that at all. So I want to train up to be a coffee machine engineer, a roaster engineer, almost just to be like, no, women can do it too. Yeah, I think it's something, again, that women could almost be scared of. But yeah, no, that's kind of my experience, really.
Just to add to that, in terms of, our technical team at La Marzocco. So we've got 3 after sales at the moment. 2 are women, 1 is a man. But you're exactly right, because I'm now thinking about on the network of approved La Marzocco engineers. I've never seen a woman.
Yeah.
They're all
It's
men.
annoying, isn't it?
Yeah. I haven't thought about that before.
I might
Yeah.
bring the engineer company up and be like,
Okay.
just send a woman.
On that, it's definitely like a traditional thing, which again, we're talking about it, we're changing it. In many countries, there's now more, for example, marketing for like engineering courses to young girls and stuff like that previously wasn't done. I also think that a part of it, it's actually that cycle of what you see represented in marketing. So, for example, like you said, at La Marzocco, you've got, 2 female engineers, and most people who have been in the specialty coffee industry for the last few years will no doubt know Estelle, who has worked at La Marzocco, because she puts herself out in spaces. She does photography. She helps at events. And so, you already know a woman who works for a coffee machine company, but that is because she's in the public eye. I think it also is to do with the public eye and who is elevated, and then I think it has that effect of, if you don't see yourself represented, you lose heart, you don't want to apply and get into it, and that results in fewer people of different backgrounds, and it's an endless circle. One that I think is changing little bit by little bit, I think because engineering, technology, and kind of lab is, I think, a little bit more rooted in the patriarchy maybe than hospitality is. Baristas, hospitality, that's very dynamic, I think, in terms of changing.
Yeah. Do we have time for another question? Or, I've got no concept of time right now, but I don't know if anyone else had anything to. Thank you so much.
Thank you for everything. I was wondering about, maybe you have tips on diverse hiring. For instance, I own a coffee roastery, so it should be already easier because there's a female owner there as well, and I really put effort in. I try to hire diverse, but the moment I put a job out there, I get mostly male CVs. So now I do need to fill the position. I do need hands on board. And I find it difficult, and I already use my own channels. But then again, it's easier for me because I can put it on my own personal Instagram. So how would you give tips out for businesses to make sure they create the opportunities to hire diverse?
Yeah, difficult.
From my experience, I was running the roastery single-handedly for a few months before I was like, oh man, I need some help. And I did exactly the same, put an ad out, and I had, I think, five men. Don't ask me how I remember this, but 5 men and 2 women. Interviewed them all great, and it came down to a guy and a girl. Weirdly, I don't know why, I got on better with the girl. And she's over on the stand now, Imogen. She's great, but are you looking for like anyone in particular? Yeah. See, it's interesting as well, because when you look at girls who grind, they're either women or non-binary people. Is there a reason for that? Obviously, they're portraying this like power girl type roastery.
Is it the accessibility that they're creating?
Yeah.
Or I think it's you also have a need on the short term and a problem that will be solved in the long term. So I think that if you hire men because men apply, or even because maybe the man is better than the woman that is applying, you will hire the best person for that job. But I think that your kind of role as well can be to more in the long run, maybe see that you have a woman that has a certain talent in like something, and just show her, well, you could want that. Maybe she isn't seeing it, but to try to push. And I think as well, kind of women to women, but I'm sure men can do that too. Or when you identify that people are blocking themselves or putting some breaks themselves. And I think it's kind of our role to make them see that first,
to take knowledge and then say, oh, you could want that, and that's okay. You are really skilled with logic and numbers. You could be an engineer. You know,